All right, our guest tonight, kind of taking the show a little different direction, is Laurie Neverman. Her website is called commonsensehome.com. Again, Laurie, it is such a pleasure to have you here and be with us here and share this stuff.
All right, yes. 1 more hour.
You got it. The first one went quick, didn't it?
It did. It always does. I've done a few podcasts. I haven't done live radio before, and it seems like we just get started with something, and it's boom, it's up.
You're a natural.
You are a natural, and you are on live radio, and it is fun.
It is. It's an interesting experience. You two are just, fun to be with, too, so that's great.
Well, thank you. Carol from California writes and says, Laurie, could you describe what a lasagna bed is?
You take some noodles and a little sauce.
Well, that's what Bill on the chat was saying too. He's like, and it's Italian It's an Italian mattress.
An Italian mattress.
Yep. No,
we just lay that down on the ground and then we plant our seeds.
With lasagna bed gardening, typically there'll be a layer of some type of reasonably impenetrable material, like wedded down newspaper or cardboard or something to smother the vegetation that's growing on the ground right to start with. And then you'll layer layers of like compost and maybe like mulch, and basically build up layers of organic material, and then finish it off with dirt on top. And then you plant into that, and then over the course of the season, the plant roots work down into the compost and other organic material, and it breaks down in place and slowly the roots work their way into the subsoil beneath it. So you sort of break new ground without breaking new ground. And it's kind of nice if you've got poor soil to start with, or you're just starting in a spot that hasn't been worked before. And you can work, it's kind of a way to work with the natural ecosystem, as opposed to when you work new soil up with a tiller, you're actually kind of destroying the existing ecosystem, because all the little earthworms, all the little microorganisms, and that tiller comes through, it's like and everybody gets a whole lot of shaking going on. It's just not pretty. So lasagna beds are kind of a kinder, gentle approach to breaking a new garden.
So now when you put down the cardboard and stuff like that, so when you go year to year, do you just let that, does it usually withstand the winter time, or does the cardboard and the paper, does it just rot into the ground and make better soil, or does it stick
over
around?
Time it all just should break down and rot into the soil, and then you can either hand dig just to work it up a little bit better, a little bit more, and something where you're forking it up versus going through. I mean, I know, like for instance, my stepdad, his approach to gardening was long, straight rows, and he'd go back and forth with the rototiller, and that was his approach to gardening. Well, in my garden beds, I have permanent beds, and I have permanent paths in a lot of the garden. And a lot of those beds just don't get worked up with the tiller anymore. I mean, we hand dig, and it's a lot gentler, and I've noticed that the soil texture over time is just getting better and better. Whereas over time, it would tend to, especially if there was like heavier rains or something, it would get hard and caked and just impenetrable. Whereas this, working with the soil more gently, you actually foster all the little microbes that keep your soil happy and healthy. And so it stays nice and light and fluffy, and it feels better to the hand. And it's also better for the plants.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, because I like, it's interesting. I tried to do a garden a couple of years ago.
Well, we were talking about this the other night, and if you want to know when I tried to do a garden, I was so proud of it, and it turned out to be all weeds.
Well,
and my friend pulled the weeds, and I got zucchini out of it.
Well, I actually went out and I went out to Home Depot, and I bought the big plants. I went and bought the real big plants with the tons of roots. And
you were thinking you're going to get a jump start on it.
Yes, I did. And I bought the cages. And all I did is the soil, I don't know if it was any good. Well, I later found out it wasn't really any good because I planted the tomato. I tilled it up by hand. I planted the tomatoes. I watered them. I put Miracle-Gro on them, and they look great. And then I just noticed the plants got kind of huge, but they didn't produce much of anything. And then they got all scrangly, and they all died, you know. And I thought, well, gosh, they were in bright sunlight. Did I overwater? And then what I realized is, after a while, the reason they died is that soil, a couple years before I put those tomato plants in there, I was spraying a lot of Roundup and stuff in there to kill things.
Oh, no.
So I think the plants kind of survived on that clump.
Oh, man. That'd do it.
Yeah. Good thing you didn't eat the tomatoes. They would have grown and ate it.
No, they were supposed to be those big beefsteak tomatoes, and they produced cherry tomatoes at best.
That Roundup.
They were terrible. They had no taste to them. So anyway,
between your story and mine, this year we should do a good garden.
We should do really good.
Check out the gardening page on the site. I'll set you up.
Okay, good. Please help us. Can you tell me we need help?
What about canning and stuff, Laurie? Do you can a lot of your things?
Oh, yeah. The boys and I put up, generally the last 2 years running, over 300 pounds of tomato products.
Oh,
wow.
Geez. See, I would love to do that. I remember that was like my fondest memory with my grandma's canning stuff. I loved to help her, but I've never done it by myself. So do you have information like that on your website about canning?
Yep, there's a section, a recipe page, and the canning recipes are on there.
Awesome. I'm going to go on there and check it
instructions
out.
For
once we get our big gardens and you send us the tips, our big tomatoes, then you can teach us how to can too.
You know, if worse comes to worse, there's always things like farmers markets too.
Yeah.
So,
I love farmers markets.
There is. There is.
And if you buy in bulk, usually you can get a discount.
Oh, yeah.
So as far as canning goes, and again, this is about being prepared. If somebody wants to, I think the big thing, of course, is not necessarily to can and then throw it on a shelf and forget about it. Obviously, you want to rotate through it. But if you do it properly, what is the life of canned food? I mean, in the glass jars and with the seal. I mean, how long, if you can tomato sauce or tomatoes or pickles, how long can they stay and you still will be okay to eat them?
Are you talking technically won't kill you or still yummy?
Well, technically won't kill you.
Because as long as it's sealed and properly sealed in the jar, and the seal
not
isn't broken,
supposed to kill you.
Yeah, if the seal isn't broken and you don't see any signs of degradation like rust or corrosion inside the lid, you can probably eat it. I don't think it'll kill you.
We'll let him try it.
Well, I actually did. My grandmother. My grandmother canned tomatoes, and actually it's been several years, but I actually ate some 1964 canned tomatoes.
Oh, I told him you bet them
not.
No,
you know what? They weren't the ones I gave you, but they were very. They actually still were tasty, and they were fine, and they were sealed right, and those were 40 years old.
Oh, yeah. Well, my grandmother, her room she kept so ice cold. She had a room she kept ice cold, and I swear she kept food there forever, but we never died, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, when you look at what's currently in the USDA guidelines, they kind of gear everything for you probably are canning with food that's loaded with botulism or something, or E. coli or some kind of nasty thing. And botulism toxins do exist in the soil. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's doing things right is very important. But sometimes I think some of their guidelines are just a little over the top. And if you follow overall safe canning procedures, there's a book I recommend called the Natural Canning Resource Book, and it explains all the chemistry behind it, and what's safe and what's not, and why. And you should be good to go, really. And I find that I typically plan to have enough of whatever preserved for a year, for sure, for our use for a year, if at all possible, given how much our garden is putting out. But a lot of times I'll try and have enough to carry over for a second year, especially on fruits, because like apples, they'll produce heavy one year, and then the next year it'll be a little bit lighter. So I kind of plan to have things in the pantry for at least 2 years, give or take. And by the third year, I usually try to rotate things out, because it's edible, but the flavor doesn't generally improve with age, except maybe the 40-year-old tomatoes.
Yeah. His grandmother's, that's why.
Yeah.
They taste just like
Grandma's special touch.
Yeah, I did. I ate them but they were fine. I mean.
But didn't she used to can just in a little small apartment with
she used to.
No air conditioning.
She lived in. She was from Chicago and lived in a 3-flat, and they used to go in the they had a huge garden, and they would tomatoes, peppers, pickles, all kinds of stuff. And she had 4 or 5 big shelves, and she would probably, there'd be several hundred of those. It was the ball jars, I remember.
The mason jars.
They would be boiling those things for days.
But she had no AC or nothing, though.
No, well, it was down in the basement, and they were on the shelves in the cool and the dark. And
well, is that the same grandmother you said that used to bake bread with
yes,
no?
Yeah.
With no AC.
She'd bake bread when it was 113 degrees outside in Chicago, and she was born in the late 1800s,
and my grandmother made
had
bread
a different perspective on life.
Well, they all,
simpler.
Grandmas were tough. They had to be.
Yes.
I know my mom's mom and my dad's mom too, for that matter. Long hours in the kitchen with the canners, and like they had, like my mom's mom, they had bees and they made their own honey. They had geese and ducks and chickens, and they processed their own, and a dairy farm, and pigs. So they processed all their own meat, and they canned the meat because there were no freezers. So that was a very big job, and rendered all the lard, and they plucked the feathers, and they saved and stripped the feathers, so they made feather ticks for the beds. They built their own house. I mean,
it's amazing.
You had to be tough to survive that.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah, I know. I think the gardening I can do, and I know on your website you talk about raising chickens and stuff like that, and that's kind of the next step. I think for us we'll start out with some tomatoes and stuff. Durhuff writes in and says, Laurie, what natural plantings can be planted to keep the critters away, i.e. bunny rabbits and insects?
How close are your neighbors? Because one of the
how close are your neighbors?
That would be part of my question. Because one of the things that people can do to help detract things that will want to eat your gardening, like deer and bunnies, is I do have the boys, because we're out in the country, kind of when they need to use the bathroom. I was like, go pee out in the bushes, boys, and pee around the edges of the garden. That will, scare off the bunnies and the deer. Honestly,
really?
They don't like the smell of human pee. But yeah, since I have boys, I can do that. Since the neighbors aren't real close. What I end up doing often in my garden to slow down the bunny rabbits in springtime, along with the sending them out to use the toileting around the edge of the yard and having cats patrolling the place, is to have used any type of really strongly scented herbs, because I have large volumes of yarrow and catnip and mints growing around my yard. I will take handfuls of those, and I'll actually sort of nestle my little pea seedlings or bean seedlings or whatever's coming up that the bunnies want to eat, and I'll use the strong scented herbs as camouflage, like nestle the little plants in there. So they're kind of hidden from the bunnies until they get strong enough to survive on their own. And as for keeping the bugs away, the healthier your plants, the less bug problems you're likely to have. Because I've seen that here. I have a lot of the same bugs that I had in town, but there I had a heavy clay soil that really was difficult to work with. And I got certain bugs in, and my plants died, and I just never had luck with those types of plants again, because diseases and things moved into the soil. Here, the bugs come, the bugs go. They nibble a little bit, but I haven't lost a crop yet. So it's just better soil and me having more knowledge of how to take care of it properly and take care of the plants properly. So just feed your plants, take care of your plants, and
keep them healthy.
So he said very close his neighbors are, so pretty much.
Yeah, probably don't run out there and
unless
do
it's
what
dark
Laurie's
and
kids are doing.
it's dark.
Yeah.
Not in the light, or don't do it in the light, but maybe in the dark.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your book, Laurie, Common Sense Health.
Okay. That basically is sort of a quickie introduction to simple changes that you can make in your life to help clear out the nasty stuff, the toxins from your life, and bring in the material your body needs to heal. So it's divided into 3 sections. There's a detox section, and that looks at things like environmental toxins and food toxins and how to avoid them. There's diet, which talks about healthy eating choices, focusing on nutrient-dense food. Like that whole diet soda thing that we mentioned earlier, don't go there. You really, that's very, very bad for you on so many levels.
Right.
And GMOs, also a big problem and like everywhere in the food supply. And I know there's a big focus on avoiding fat still right now for much of the population, and I stopped avoiding fat, I don't know, that was probably about 5 years ago, and I have lost weight since I started eating more fat. So that's, a big thing that's kind of against the status quo right now. And then the final section of the book is about physical activities other than exercise, because exercise is great, but there's kind of like small things that are a little bit fringe, dare I say, like oil pulling and barefoot therapy that are coming into more common practice now, but most people really haven't heard of them. But they can be done in typically a few minutes a day and can have very positive effects on your health. And they're simple enough that pretty much anyone can do them. So it's just, again, the whole common sense approach to health.
Right. Go ahead.
Oh, I think I was going to ask.
Oh, yeah, another question.
Bobcat. He asked if you could use bobcat urine.
Yeah, Laurie, can I use bobcat urine?
I wouldn't want to go collect it, but sure.
He's within 50 feet of his neighbor, so he wondered if he could use other kinds of urine. Probably, maybe it would work.
Yeah, I think any type of predator urine will certainly slow down the predators. If he's got deer can be remarkably determined, so that it might slow him down, but I don't know if big monster fence is the only thing that completely stops him here. Rabbits might have more effect, but the most effective thing I have found is the camouflage. And I think as long as you're not actually touching the plants, I probably wouldn't go any closer than, say, 2 feet. But outside of that range,
like you said, like herbs like mint, and what other kind of herbs could he use to camouflage?
I don't know what grows there that is particularly stinky.
Okay, just anything that's stinky will work.
Yeah, you're looking for that really strong and possibly even offensive type odor to camouflage the more appealing plants.
Okay.
Gotcha. Let's move a little bit, if we can, into a section that you have on your website, and of course this was probably the driving element, but we talked about so many other great things because I think it's all tied together, and that's about preparedness. I think there's a lot of people, again, here in Utah. This is kind of the home, if you will, of food storage and what have you. Of course, a lot of people here have food storage. I guess if you could call organic popcorn and granola bars at our house food storage, but
no granola bars for me, just
no,
organic popcorn. That's also
organic
whatever.
Popcorn. But I think one
I
thing
could grow
is
my own popcorn.
You're giving preppers a bad name right now.
I know. But no, this is kind of the subject I really did want to talk about, because again, out here we have a lot of people that are prepared, and there's a lot of us that are not. What do you suggest, Laurie? I mean, are you set up there if things really went bad? I mean, again, let's say a major power grid failure, whatever, an earthquake, financial collapse. Are you set up to be able to carry through some pretty hard times for quite a while?
We'd certainly do our best to make it work. Are we as self-sufficient as I would like? No, not yet. And the more I learn, the more I realize that there are still a lot of things that I have left to learn. And that's part of why I created the site, actually, because it's so easy to be dependent. It's just easy. I mean, to flip that light switch and not have to worry about where the power's coming from.
Right.
To go to the grocery store and not have to worry about whether or not there's going to be food there. But once you start thinking about the details of the supply chains and where everything's coming from, it's life-changing, or at least it can be. And so just taking, I know that we're not nearly as ready as I'd like, but it's a process. And so I encourage people not to get freaked out by saying, I couldn't ever. Like, yes, you could, probably if you had to, and just start with one thing and build on it and don't panic.
Exactly.
So, like with water, I think that's probably one of the things that in a natural disaster. I mean, I would say that, if there was, let's just say, economic collapse,
water and food,
I think water would probably be pumping for a while, but in a natural disaster, water may not be pumping. So, do you recommend that people store water?
I think that you should probably have, at a minimum, water enough for your family members for a 2-week period, if at all possible. And, the average American uses something like 16, I don't have my facts in front of me, but we use a lot of water.
Exactly.
If you have, at a minimum, say 2 gallons per person per day, and that would be a bare minimum, because, think about it. If you want to cook something.
Exactly.
If you want to cook beans or rice or noodles, or even just vegetables, if it's not canned, you typically put a little water in the bottom. Washing your hands, washing your face, brushing your teeth, very minimum hygiene needs.
Exactly.
So, I think that's an excellent place to start, because...
What would you recommend people that are listening that haven't started food storage, that want to go start it, and they want to, what would the staple items maybe be to start?
Well, that's kind of tricky now, because so many people are on special diets or have to deal with allergies.
Exactly.
So if someone's going gluten-free, obviously stocking up on the old staple of wheat, that's not a good choice for them, because their preparedness stash could kill them, or at least make them very sick. So you really need to look at what your family is willing to eat, because that's another issue, too. You don't want to store things and then be in the middle of a crisis and have, especially like younger kids or fussy eaters, refuse to eat. So look at shelf life, but also look at what your family is willing to consume.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I do have a list on the site. It's top 10 real foods to store without electricity, and that focuses on items that will keep without being, refrigerated or frozen. And you can use like home preserved canned products, home grains, chia seeds, sprouting seeds, high quality saturated fat like coconut oil or lard will actually keep, is shelf stable in sealed airtight containers at a cool room temperature, not refrigerated. Dried beans, real salt, bulk herbs, teas, spices, natural sweeteners like white sugar, raw sugar, honey, maple syrup have fairly long shelf life and are a quick source of energy. So those would be some of the top places that I would start with, things that will keep.
One thing I've heard that is, and you can maybe reiterate, as long as you're not allergic to it, I've heard some people say that you can buy like peanut butter in a 5-gallon container. And peanut butter is a pretty good source of protein and can keep you going for quite some time. Is that true?
Yeah, it's fairly shelf stable. I don't know that I'd really want to purchase an entire 5-gallon bucket of peanut butter.
Right.
Because unless you got peanut butter fanatics in your house. But you think about it, generally when you're looking at food storage, once you crack open one of your sealed containers, then you're opening it to rancidity. So something like gallon tubs might be a lot more practical, because then you're not contaminating the rest of what you have in storage.
Very true. I never thought about that. Very true. What about for water? If you don't have the capacity to store it, what about purifying it?
Well, there are a ton of options for purifying water now. I mean, the simplest thing, it really depends on how nasty the water is. And if you're looking at just dealing with particulates, even filtering it through a silk scarf or a cotton T-shirt will get out a lot of the particulate matter. Now, if you're dealing with something like bacterial contamination or, potential fecal contamination, say there's overflowing sewers and floodwaters, then you're going to want something like a high-quality ceramic filter. And if you do any searching on the preparedness websites, or like I do have a site that post that specifically deals with water storage and water filtration, you're going to want like a reverse osmosis filter or a very high quality ceramic filter, something that has a pore size that is small enough to strain out the little itty-bitty microorganisms that may be little itty-bitty in size but cause really huge problems in your guts.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just from personal experience, years and years ago, I went on a camping trip, and I bought a couple of these over at Kmart. They had these flexible 5-gallon water containers you could buy. They're a plastic container, and they actually work very, very well. They have they're collapsed down. You buy them, they're like in a bag. I know they still sell them because I saw them over there not too long ago. And you could fill them up, and they're a durable thing. But the one thing I will advise to anybody who buys a container, while things are good, make sure you flush that thing out, wash it out with some sort of a bleach, or I wouldn't say ammonia, but make sure that you clean that container
Is that a
out.
yummy flavor?
Well, no. What happened to me, Laurie, is I didn't rinse the thing out. I forgot all about it. We were leaving on the camping trip. I filled it up in the utility room and went on the camping trip. It was about 104 degrees down in southern Illinois, and was drinking out of it like there was no tomorrow.
Ooh.
And I don't know what was in that thing.
You almost had a trip to Mexico, didn't you?
Well, let me tell you, about 3 weeks the effects held in. That was horrific, and I don't know what was in that thing because I bought them brand new, but there was something in there.
There's a toy surprise inside. Oich.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's the big thing is that is to make sure that whatever you put the water in is clean, because I can't experience it. It made me sicker than a dog for almost a month.
Yeah, that is true. I know people talk about, just use old milk cartons or something. Oh, I have used old milk jugs in my garden to make like a primitive wall of water type of thing, like a thermal mass for my garden.
Right.
The scum that grows in those milk jugs, I would not throw my drinking water in there.
Especially
I don't care how much you wash it, rinse it.
Yep. Especially in that handle area.
Yeah.
Where everything gets caught up in.
Yeah, the wedgie.
It's right. Exactly. What about for preparedness? Now, I was looking on your site. Again, commonsensehome.com. You've got all kinds of great stuff, little cooking stoves. And again, why I'm really pushing this on the program tonight is that I look back when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, and I know some people may be saying, "Oh, come on, you get a little overboard on this," but when those gigantic supermarkets cleared out in 7 hours, I mean, when they were emptied in 7 hours, that's probably the perfect little video that any prepping type video could be on the launch page of the homepage, to see how in 7 to 12 hours a supermarket was demolished. It was wiped out because people just panicked.
I don't think it was in New York, no. It's in Atlanta.
Yeah, your typical American city, and I would not advise Googling this because it'll get you on some kind of search list, but they have supplies on hand for roughly 2 to 3 days because we're just built on an as-need supply chain. So if something disrupts that supply chain, the shelves go empty. It's that simple. The stores don't stock back inventory like they used to.
Right.
So if they don't, you need to. It's that simple.
Yeah, it is. And Carol said that was on the East Coast, but it doesn't matter. I mean, if there was, my understanding, and maybe some of the listeners that listen to us in California would comment, when they had that 5.0 the other night, I'm sure people ran out and started stocking up.
Yeah, it gets scary.
Because when it happens.
Well, what's sad is
so
you don't know when
quickly.
it's going to happen. That's the problem.
Or here in Utah, people always comment about the earthquake, and if the earthquake comes, it'll probably be in the middle of summer. Well, what if it happens when it's 20 below zero? Those are the things that we don't think about. What about keeping healthy, Laurie? That was probably the thing that started this all off. Is people, we've got a lot of listeners, a lot of people that have medical issues. What do you do? I mean, what do you do to stay healthy? Let's say it's 2, 3, 4 weeks before power and water is restored. And again, it depends on the magnitude of the situation. But what does a person need to watch out for so that they don't get sick? Because maybe today if we get a little infection or something, you run to the doctor, you get a shot, and it's over. An antibiotic or something, and it's over with. But what about if things again were going bad and doctors are not available? What do you do to stay healthy?
Well, there are a lot of things that used to be common knowledge that aren't so common anymore, and I do have a section on the site that deals specifically with home remedies for a number of different common ailments, everything from arthritis to earaches. And there are a lot of different things that you can use, like just out of your pantry, out of your own cupboard, herbs that you can grow and different food items that can help tremendously with a variety of everyday emergencies. For instance, typically burns, you would want to treat, you'd be looking for burn cream or, depending on the severity of it. But honey, like good quality raw honey or manuka honey, if you put that on a burn, that will help heal the burn, and it actually acts to keep the wound clean and heal it. Because my husband got a really bad burn when we were working on the garden a couple of years ago. He touched the tiller when the engine was hot, and he got about an inch-long burn, about half an inch wide at the base of his thumb. And yeah, it was nasty. And it puffed up, and we got it under the cold water. We put aloe on it, and then once it cooled down, we put lavender essential oil, and plantain oil on it, and that knocked out the pain. Primarily the lavender essential oil, but the plantain is also a healing oil. And then after that, we dressed the wound with honey. Well, the next day when he unwound it, the blister was completely gone.
Really?
It had actually been absorbed with the honey, and then the pain was gone too, and that skin healed in under 2 weeks, and it looked like baby skin. It was just smooth and soft. It never got nasty or peeled. It was beautiful. So if you start experimenting with small things now, doing for yourself when you can, instead of, running for antibiotics or running for every little thing. Now, if it's serious, obviously, please check with a doctor. Don't try to home remedy everything. Yeah. But just start thinking more about the little things and what can you do for yourself. And that's a good place to start. So.
Well, again, because and just being careful with what you do. I mean, it doesn't take much of a scrape or a cut or whatever, and if it's not looked after, it goes really bad. But again, these are kind of the things that people don't think about. And like one thing with Carol's son, with our 26-year-old son, he's a type 1 diabetic, and that is probably our biggest fear, is that if whatever you ended up off the grid or whatever for a month or so. It's a really serious situation.
But not only that, but there's people like I take heart medicine. There's heart medicine. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just I don't know. It's just scary.
It is, and sometimes there will be ways that you can be potentially weaned off a medication and through herbs or lifestyle changes or things like that. And sometimes not.
And there's people oxygen. There's just so many things out there that's scary for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to be like you said, to be prepared is probably the most important thing. What is your family? I mean, you obviously, like you said, there's things you'd like to do, things that you'd like to have in better shape. Do you constantly, obviously, again, going through your website, you do your own gardening? Do you raise any of your own animals at all?
We haven't, because as I mentioned earlier in the show, that we didn't know whether or not we were going to be able to have to move. And then I have some wonderful friends who live about 5 minutes away who grow just about everything under the sun, every kind of critter, that honks or squeaks or quacks or So they set me up with eggs, they set me up with meat, and it's really nice. I'm very lucky, very fortunate to live in an area of the country where I do have friends with farms, and so I can source like we just put half a steer in the freezer from another friend that's about 10 minutes away a couple of weeks ago, and I've got another friend with a cow, and friends with eggs and chickens, and so we've kind of got a supply net set up around here, and we swap or barter or work it out so that everybody gets what they need.
Have you ever raised chickens?
Oh gosh, yes. When I was growing up back on the farm, we used to raise huge flocks of birds every year, and chickens, ducks, geese, a few turkeys, a couple nasty guinea hens. Those are wicked. But yeah, so I do have experience with it. I just haven't done it recently.
Have you done any like YouTube videos or anything?
Not yet.
You really should.
That's something I have been meaning to get to. There's only so many hours.
Oh, I know,
a day,
especially taking care of the kids and doing everything in the house stuff and school
We did get a clip-on mic and a hookup to use with my husband's phone because he was researching, how to do videos. And we actually bought a little video camera, and the sound on it was horrible. Bad idea. Get stuff on Christmas clearance. So the sound quality on the phone is better than the camera sound was. And with little Mike, I think we've got it going on. So hopefully within the next couple months, I'll start getting some things out there.
Well, again, because the website, Laurie, is just it's amazing, and people need to go take a look at it, and they can learn so much from it. And also, we ask our listeners to support your links. Again, there's just
and the websites.
The website is commonsensehome.com. I was going through your section on water storage, on rainwater storage. You guys have a system built up for this?
Well, it's pretty basic, but we do have in season 2 50-gallon drums worth of storage outside, and that's primarily used for just the gardening and plant watering, that type of thing, not for drinking water. But it is really nice because rainwater is typically a soft water as opposed to well water, which is hard water, and that's easier for the plants to assimilate.
Gotcha. And if you had to drink it, I guess you could.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we've got, I don't know, like half a dozen different types of water filtration devices in the house, everything from the little personal life straws to the Berkey to a pump filter to, hook it up, let's go.
Let me put some of the questions to you that our listeners sent in. It said, Laurie, when did you decide to go with this type of approach for your living environment? Is it just something you always wanted to do?
Well, I've always been kind of a greenie, you might say, or crunchy mama, whatever you want to call it. Now, I don't know what's the most popular term at the time, but, with growing up in the country and then studying the green energy material. And then we knew we wanted to move out into the country after we had been living in the suburbs for a while. And that was something we had always planned to do. We wanted to have our acreage in the country. And then once we started building, we started researching. My husband, before he got into computers, he's an IT guy too. Before he got into computers, he wanted to be an architect. And so we had a lot of time from when our house sold to when we actually were able to build. So we did hours upon hours of research, and things just started coming together. We found a builder we liked, and we just started integrating the different green building aspects into the home. And then as the home was coming together, we started, reaching out in the community and meeting people and then building the lifestyle to go with the home. And so it's just kind of evolved over time. But, it feels right. It's just a fit for us. So I know that's not the case for everybody, but for us it works.
Another question is have you ever considered just going all out and being totally off the grid and totally self-sustainable?
Yes, I have. No, I'm not going to do it, at least not yet. Big thing is, as we mentioned earlier, simply convenience and cost, because I have priced out what it would take to do that with what we currently have, and it's an investment that we can't make at this time, but maybe at the future we will be able to. So, we're working, saving towards that. And then, I know what's required, and we're just not there yet.
Yeah.
But maybe someday.
Yeah.
Do you think that living where you're at, I mean, that's if you were going to kind of go off the grid, maybe not off the grid is the right term, but if you were going to become really sustainable, do you think Wisconsin would be the place to go, or do you think you'd be better off to move to a warmer climate, maybe something a little bit more, something that you don't have? The problem up there is the extreme winters, and of course some people like the seasonal change. But do you think it would be, if a person was going to consider, if they had the opportunity to say, look, I got a chunk of change, and I'm going to go ahead and build, kind of be self-sustainable, do you think you would stay where you're at, or do you think you try to go south a little bit and get away from the harsh winters?
That's an interesting question, and something that my husband and I have discussed at length, because we didn't know if we would need to be relocating because of job issues and so forth. The thing is, where I am parked right now, we're next to some of the biggest freshwater bodies in the entire world. It's like I got Lake Michigan sitting on my doorstep. That fresh water is life.
Right.
We have certainly harsh weather, but the house is built to compensate for that to some degree, at least, and we could improve that because it's super insulated, so we're not quite as affected by some others, or by the weather as some others would be. Also, there's a very strong local food network here. As I mentioned, I have friends, I have local sources who do these different things. So there's a very strong local food economy. There's just a lot of different things in terms of the community focus here. People reaching out to support each other, and that's very good also. And we're not really close to major metropolitan areas. If the shit does hit the fan, so to speak, it's not going to be pretty near the cities. And that's going to be a high-risk area.
Right.
So there's certainly negative things about here, but there's also a lot of positives. So I don't know. I personally wasn't ready to pick up and move. So.
Well, you make a good point, and the other thing is, I think being in the city is probably not the best place to be, because if they ever really did go bad, and I'm not talking about a natural disaster, I'm talking about maybe an economic disaster. I mean, it wouldn't take much for things to in my own opinion, within 5 to 10 days, to just really be in bad shape. I mean, I think a lot of people would be standing there with their hand on their side and not even realize what's happening, what's going around them. And then, of course, you get you get the unity, of course, but then you're going to get, hey, I got to look out for myself. I got to, the greed. I'm going to take advantage if I can. And I agree with you. I think being where you're at is probably a good thing. You're far enough. You're out there a ways where you're going to be able to stay out of the, having the guy down the street try to come in and kick in the door and take what you've got.
Yeah, it's really weird how life's changed, though, because sometimes we watch off-the-grid videos, and we've talked about it. We've talked about just taking a trip and going off.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is.
And, but 20 years ago, would you ever thought that way? Probably
Never.
not.
No,
things have changed.
Yeah, they have.
No, I think that I think that people are, again, I think after this, by no means are we out of this economic recession. I don't think by any means we are.
No.
Maybe we're on top of the bubble, but things are kind of in a state of flux. And if they change, again, just like I said, it doesn't take much to see those grocery stores get emptied out. It doesn't take much to see a gallon of milk skyrocket to $20 a gallon. I mean, it is supply and demand. And again, what you're doing and what you educate people by people, coming to your website and seeing what you're doing. And like you said, even though it isn't exactly where you want it to be, it isn't perfect. You are yards and yards ahead of everybody. Laurie,
yeah. Do you do any newsletters or anything in your email yet?
Well, when I have new posts coming out, I do have a mailing list for those, so people can keep up. And I share also some of the older posts that are related, so that people can kind of have an idea about what content that's on the site that they might not be familiar with.
Cool.
So they can get out there and take a look. Laurie, I want to thank you
Yes.
so much for coming on, and I hope that we could get you back on again down the road and talk about more things, and we'll try the garden thing out and let you know how it's doing. But it was such an
just
honor.
shoot me
to
an
have
email if you need some help. I'm here.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much.
you. Yeah, and again, your book is called Common Sense Health. You can go out to commonsensehome.com. Again, thank you so much for staying up and being with us and giving some time on Saturday night to us.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Okay,
Well,
Laurie.
thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
All right,
Good
good
night.
night.
Take care.